Welcome to the Penn State Show here on DK Sports Radio. I'm your host, Audrey Snyder, and that's it. The 2018 recruiting class is officially in the bag, finalized as of Wednesday afternoon. Penn State finishes up a consensus top 5 class, and really, if you're the Nittany Lions, I think you walk away from this one thinking, wow, probably couldn't have done a whole lot better. I mean, you look at their areas of need, which I think especially both trenches, they certainly addressed that. So all in all, Nittany Lions finished with a class that has 23 members. So again, they're not at that capacity, that 25 number. But I think that could really help them kind of moving forward, the fact that they didn't reach and take people. So I will dig into that on today's show as well. Plus, we had a first listen with new assistant coaches, Seider, as well as David Corley. They met with the media on Wednesday via a teleconference because, well, State College got at least 6 inches of snow and ice, and I look out my window and there's sleet and just typical State College in February, which I think backs my non-scientifically proven theory that it snows every year here on signing day. So regardless of if Penn State moves the date up or not, seems like it always snows. So Wednesday was certainly true to form. And also later on in the show, we'll get into kind of the new assistants, their recruiting territories, kind of my impressions of them, as well as some other things that James Franklin had to say when he met with the media on Wednesday. I thought it was pretty insightful teleconference, especially for this time of the year. He kind of shed some light on a few positions moving forward. So we'll dig into that in a little bit. But first things first, this 2018 recruiting class, like I said, consensus top 5 group. I feel like the thing with recruiting classes is people always want to know, well, who did they miss out on and those sorts of things. You're going to have this in every class, but James Franklin said that, he wished they would have, maybe been able to take a second safety, or maybe they would have been able to take a 4th wide receiver. And really, I'm certain that he says that because Solomon Enos decided on Wednesday, opted to go to Utah instead of Penn State, USC, Arizona State. So you have that one there, which could have been your 4th wide receiver. But also, you could have had Shaquan Anderson-Butts as that athlete wide receiver. Anderson-Butts announced Wednesday that he will be heading to Iowa Western Community College. So that kind of backs the rumors that have been floating around about him not being an academic qualifier at Penn State. So, that's one that certainly didn't come as a surprise. None of these moves came as a surprise to this Penn State staff. We hear all the time about how these guys are out collecting transcripts and all these things, and they've been in close contact with someone like Anderson-Butts since he committed in July. And so, I think it's pretty safe to say both sides kind of knew what they were in for there. And so he will now go the junior college route. And, you have to kind of see what happens with his career there, but certainly not in Penn State's picture right now. So again, that could have kind of been the 4th receiver that Franklin mentioned as well. Certainly the second safety. Penn State, got Isaiah Humphries, actually already has him on campus as one of their 6 January early enrollees. But no doubt that was kind of speaking right to safety Ashim Young. And that's one of those things where Penn State goes out, gets the verbal pledge from Young, and then, of course, he reportedly robbed a Wawa in South Philadelphia in July, which as you guys all know, didn't come to light until much later on. He's maintained his innocence, but I believe he's actually due Young back in court today, February 8th. So we'll have to see. But again, that's one of those situations where both sides have kind of moved forward. And certainly, I know we've talked about it on here before, the legal process has to play itself out, certainly well ahead of any scholarship situations. But really, I don't think either of those, whether it's the wide receiver or the safety, has that big of a bearing on this class. And I say that because Penn State already had 3 wide receivers in this class that they brought in. Jahan Dotson was kind of that surprise guy in December who was a little bit, late on the radar, especially for Penn State as far as joining the class. So they've got 3 really good wide receivers in Daniel George, Justin Shorter, and then Jahan Dotson. And they also have 3 guys who redshirted last year. So that gives you 6 guys, all bunched up within 2 classes who have yet to play. So I think not getting that 4th guy really isn't a big deal. However, Perhaps if you look down the road at the 2019 class, maybe they feel a little stronger about the receivers who were in the 2018 class than they do potentially with some of the 2019 prospects. So we'll have to see there. But as for safety now, what do they kind of do to, you only get one safety in this class? Well, Franklin said that they do think they might have some position flexibility with some of their cornerbacks. So you look at it, they of course signed Trent Gordon and Jordan Minor. So just looking at that kind of off the top of my head, they list Gordon at 5'11", Minor's listed as 6'1". So again, maybe it's too early to say with these guys, but if you have a 6'1" corner, that potentially could be a safety prospect down the line, or maybe they have a guy that they redshirted last year that they could kind of switch over to safety if need be. So that'll definitely be an area of need in the coming years. Same thing with defensive tackle. Penn State did a really nice job of addressing that need in this class, and the fact that they get Aeneas Hawkins, P.J. Mustipher, they really beefed up both lines, offensively and defensively. But again, these are guys, and something I wrote on the site, that you won't see these guys right away. Typically, your offensive linemen, your defensive linemen are among the last to see the field. Now, we did see it this past year with Yetur Gross-Matos, the freshman defensive end, who came in, played right away. But that's, usually an uphill battle for some of those guys just because of the strength and the speed, the size required to play those positions. That just doesn't happen overnight. So we'll have to see there. But really, Penn State adds Rasheed Walker on signing day to get two really talented offensive tackles. And I think that's really telling when you look at it. And I know I've written it before that James Franklin always talks about with his offensive linemen, he wants position flexibility. They don't want a guy who just says, listen, I'm an offensive tackle, that's all I can play. They won't go that route. And they've kind of already proven that with the guys that they have on their roster. Someone like a Michael Mennett, who presumably is going to move around whenever he, steps into a bigger role. We've seen that already play out with Connor McGovern, guy who played center, played guard. We've seen it with Ryan Bates. We also saw it with Brendan Mann, who moved all over the place. So they feel like they've got not only four really solid offensive linemen in this class, highlighted by those two tackles, and Juice Scruggs, of course, along the interior, Bryce Effner in there as well. So I just think you look at it, they see Effner as kind of a swing guy, meaning he could play multiple spots in there. We'll see with the tackles. Usually we've seen with Penn State anyway, they'll play both left and right as they kind of get used to it. And Scruggs, it gives you that versatility, which is really valuable inside as well. So Franklin kind of rattled off, during his teleconference on Wednesday, just this offensive line combination moving forward. And I thought it was really fitting that he kind of ended his quote talking about the offensive line, saying, he thinks that they got a hell of a class. And I think that's certainly, on paper anyway, really looks like that's the case. So that's it on the 2018 class. As we all know, never ends. Moving ahead to 2019, 2020, I'll have some stories up on the site about that later on this week, and how, kind of how advantageous it was for Penn State to have this early signing period, and the fact that they only got one signature on Wednesday, but Franklin did concede that they were only expecting one on Wednesday. So they knew what they were in for, no surprises on signing day, which is always a good thing. But when we come back, we'll dig in a little bit on some of the new assistant coaches and hear their thoughts on this class and their recruiting territories. When we come back, here on the Penn State Show on DK Sports Radio.
Mike Lang here, reminding you it's hockey season, and Lions Pride has everything Penn State for every Penn Stater. Oh, hallelujah, Hollywood. They have a wide selection of hockey hats, t-shirts, jerseys, and hoodies. Lions Pride is your one-stop Penn State shop for the Nittany Lion hockey fan in your family. Get in the fast lane, Grandma, and stop by our store at 112 East College Avenue before or after the games at Paculo Arena, or shop online 24/7 at lions-pride.com. Lions Pride, everything Penn State for every Penn Stater.
It's time to cash in on non-stop sports action with MyBookie.ag. They have in-game live betting on nearly every sporting event, plus MyBookie.ag will match your deposit with a bonus up to 100%. With decades of expertise and no-hassle payouts, You'll experience the greatest customer service in the business, guaranteed. Use promo code DKRadio to activate your bonus of up to 100%. Call 844-900-BETS or visit mybookie.ag to open an account. Sign up today.
Miller Lite is the original light beer, and we'll always brew it to have more taste, with only 96 calories and 3.2 carbs. Because we believe that if you compromise on taste, you can taste the compromise. Miller Lite. Hold true.
Great beer, great responsibility. 2018 Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Average analysis, 12 fluid ounces. Less than 1 gram protein, 0 grams fat.
What I want from my public accounting firm is big ideas.
But I don't want to lose the personal attention.
My company needs global capabilities.
From a firm with local ownership.
And I want to work with industry experts.
Who take the time to understand my unique challenges. And that's what sets Snyder Downs apart. Expertise for the most complex business issues. With the service you need every day. To learn how our big thinking with a personal focus can help your company, visit SnyderDowns.com.
If you're one of the thousands of Western Pennsylvanians who love to get outdoors, then you need to check out this amazing new website, stepoutside.org. Hi, I'm Dan Kovacevic of DK Sports Radio. I'm born and raised in Pittsburgh. I know about the outdoor life that's available to all of us in Western Pennsylvania. Learn where, when, and how you can go camping, hiking, hunting, take part in power sports, shooting sports, water sports, in your local community, across our region, across the
Welcome back to the Penn State Show here on DK Sports Radio, the post-signing day episode here in early February. And, you know, Wednesday was also interesting because it was our first chance to talk with Seider and also David Corley, two of Penn State's newest assistant coaches. Of course, with Corley officially coaching the wide receivers, while Seider will coach the running backs. You know, I mentioned position flexibility in the last segment with the offensive line. Well, Penn State, as Franklin mentioned, also had some position flexibility with their coaching staff. As I'm sure many of you remember, they originally brought in Corley, who coached the wide receivers at Army last year, to then coach the running backs at Penn State, but then they were able to get Seider, and so they switched it around. Seider is the running backs, Corley is the wide receivers. Both seem pretty happy about that. But it really important to note here is kind of where these guys are going to be recruiting. Now, as we all know, Penn State recruits nationally by position. So, as we've seen, especially since James Franklin has been here with these past four classes, all top 25 classes, Penn State will always be in the mix, or at least in the mix for most of these kids nationally. That certainly helps when you have team success, no doubt about that. Where Seider really comes in is really what we all expected. His impact is going to be in Florida. That's where he's from. That's where also he came from most recently, having worked at Florida. That's where he spent 8 years as a high school coach. So now, of course, he also has the ties to West Virginia. His wife is from West Virginia as well. But Seider's ties, or his recruiting territory rather, will certainly be focused in Florida. He will also have a little bit of Ohio, he said, as well as a little bit of Erie, Pennsylvania. But I thought it was really interesting that James Franklin just kind of came right out and said it on Wednesday. He said, you know what, when you go after a guy like Seider, who Franklin said really blew him away in his interview, Franklin said that, you know, you then say, okay, we're going to take a different recruiting strategy in Florida and you're going to be more aggressive there. So certainly, you know, it means dedicating more resources to Florida in terms of getting Seider out there, you know, as much as he can, tapping into those relationships that he's built. And I'm really curious, as I know many Penn State fans are, is to see how this thing goes for them, because this is a talent-rich area. This is a guy who Franklin said, you know, not only wowed him in his interview, but he was also really impressed looking at his background, kind of following it from afar, his success as a recruiter. So we'll have to see how that goes. But when talking to prospects and kind of getting them to buy in to a program, Seider was asked about kind of his pitch to prospects and what that is, and how do you get a kid from Florida to come up here to Happy Valley, where, as we all can see on days like today, it's not too pleasant. Cold temps, you know, at least 6 inches of snow on the ground. And here was Seider's response to that.
Well, I mean, I'm from Florida. I left Florida to come up here. I think it's a trade-off. You know, most people use that too much to negative recruitment hurt you more than it helps you. You know what I mean? Kids adjust. I mean, every kid want to play in the NFL, so they get over that weather part of it. You know, it's cold, but most people like dressing up, putting a sweatshirt on. Then the trade-off is when it's real hot down there, well, you get the nice, mild summers up here.
So there you have it, J1 Seider. What kid doesn't want to get dressed up and wear a winter coat, right? I guess whatever works in recruiting. So Penn State, I'm sure, will be using that pitch. And, you know, with these changes, they bring in David Corley, and Franklin had said, which I found this to be interesting and also pretty funny, but kind of telling, I guess, about this profession, is that Corley interviewed with Franklin when Franklin was, of course, the head coach at Vanderbilt. So Josh Gaddis interviewed with him, David Corley interviewed with him. Franklin ultimately chose Gaddis, who has since gone on to Alabama, but kind of the whole thing comes back full circle then when Franklin is looking to fill Gaddis's replacement. He said he kept in contact with Corley, you know, since he interviewed with him back at Vanderbilt. So David Corley becomes the guy here at Penn State. And, you know, that's how this business is, right? It's a matter of Franklin keeping tabs on guys who he knows down the road impressed him, guys who he might want to work with. I thought it was interesting that he pointed to both of these guys as former quarterbacks and kind of the traits associated with that position and the knowledge of football in general, that, you know, the quarterback has to really know everything. They have to know how to read defenses. The fact that both of these guys have coached multiple positions, which gives this coaching staff that position flexibility to kind of move them around. So Corley said his recruiting territories will consist of the Tidewater and Virginia Beach areas, as well as Atlanta, Georgia, kind of the area outside a little bit north of the city of Atlanta. And he also said New Jersey. He'll have part of Jersey as well. So, of course, that makes sense, you know, given the fact with his ties to William and Mary. So you can look at that and say, okay, Virginia, that makes a lot of sense. He also said that he had recruited Atlanta for about 6 years prior. So you look at that there, really checks out nicely for Penn State when you know, of course, how much talent's in that area. And he said, you know, with New Jersey and kind of North Jersey, the more he got out there recently, he kind of remembered all these connections that he had, the fact that, you know, other people he had played with before who now coach at different high schools in New Jersey. So, again, you're getting a guy who's been in this business for a long time, who's well-connected enough, so it's certainly going to help you. And Corley said that, you know, he thinks highly of these three receivers that Penn State signed in this class and that he's, you know, starting to get to know these other receivers on this roster. And I asked him kind of what his impressions were of Juwan Johnson so far and getting to know some of these guys. And, you know, that's not an easy process. I mean, this thing will take time. And at this point, you know, Penn State's in the midst of winter workouts. So you have new coaches who are getting acclimated, but also jumping ahead to 2019 and 2020 recruiting classes. So I think you've got a lot of people across town in the Lash building kind of juggling a lot of different roles right now. But here's what Corley had to say about his impressions on this receiving core that he inherits.
Oh, building relationships is going to take some time. But, you know, we've had a meeting. We've worked out through winter conditioning, and the guys seem great. I've heard, you know, coming in, nothing but great things about their work ethic and their personalities. So, you know, when we met, you know, I just kind of told them a little bit about myself and kind of some of the things that I'm looking for from them, what they can expect from me. And I thought that our first day was awesome. Those guys really got out there and really worked hard. So I'm looking forward to building a relationship with them as we go along.
And there you have David Corley on this Penn State receiving core. So as these guys continue to get, you know, adjusted and get acclimated here, it'll be interesting to see, you know, how the new players get assimilated and all these sorts of things. But, you know, my thinking always has been recruits, kids, players, they're pretty resilient. They've kind of been through this. They understand this is a business. So really it's back to work as usual for Penn State, which this time of year that means back to the grind. That is winter workouts. So James Franklin talked a little bit about that on Wednesday as well. So we will dive into Franklin and the winter workouts here on our final segment.
Mike Lang here reminding you it's hockey season, and Lions Pride has everything Penn State for every Penn Stater. Oh, hallelujah, Hollywood. They have a wide selection of hockey hats, t-shirts, jerseys, and hoodies. Lions Pride is your one-stop Penn State shop for the Nittany Lion hockey fan in your family. Get in the fast lane, Grandma, and stop by our store at 112 East College Avenue before or after the games at Bakuto Arena, or shop online 24/7 at lions-pride.com. Lions Pride, everything Penn State for every Penn Stater.
In Pittsburgh, we bleed black and gold and love our city. Born in Pittsburgh and now celebrating 130 years in business, Henny Jewelers is proud to be your premier jewelry store. Whether it's choosing that watch you've always wanted or you're searching for the ring that was made for her, trust Henny Jewelers. Visit our store on Walnut Street in Shadyside to see our extensive inventory of designer engagement rings, watches, and one-of-a-kind jewelry. For more, go to hennyjewelers.com and follow on social.
Embarrassed by that stained carpet in your office? Tired of looking at your dull, dirty floor? My Floor Needs is here to fix that. With years of experience and 24/7 service, My Floor Needs offers stripping and waxing, carpet, tile, grout, and concrete cleaning, as well as polishing and buffing services. Call 888-67-MY-FLOOR or email info@myfloorneeds.com for a free estimate and get your floors looking like new again. Whatever your floor needs, call 888-67-MY-FLOOR.
Does your company ever miss its sales goals or struggle getting new business?
Is it tough to hire or to give reps the right tools?
Hi, I'm Dan, and I started Engaged Prospect right here in Pittsburgh to help companies like yours.
And I'm Sam. We're helping companies hit sales goals and grow their businesses.
Think of us as your inside sales team.
Our clients are experts in their fields. We're experts in inside sales.
Give us a call today at 412-715-5151.
Or visit us online at engagedprospect.com/DK.
It's been 50 years since the Summer of Love, but if you're not performing as well as you'd like, check out NEDforless.com. I'm Eric Cushy of Curtis Pharmacy. Don't pay premium prices for the little blue pill. So Denafil, the same active ingredient as in Viagra, costs 80% less. NEDforless.com. All we need is your physician's name. We do the rest. Free shipping, too. NDDforless.com. Curtis Pharmacy, Western PA's Better Way Pharmacy.
And we're back here for the third and final segment on the Penn State Show here on DK Sports Radio. And in the midst of James Franklin's signing day / catch-all / end of season / look ahead to spring news conference that was Wednesday, he was asked about the kicking competition and kind of his thoughts on that. And he did say that while Penn State, of course, signed Jake Pinniger in this class, a scholarship kicker, he said that, they still in the future will have some concerns about punter, mainly because now you have Blake Gillikin, who will be entering his junior season, scholarship punter, but they don't have a scholarship punter behind him. Now, obviously, you're not going to take one every class, so that maybe is a need that we'll see them address potentially in 2019. But when it comes to the kicking competition, Penn State wants to get back to what we saw 2 years ago, where it was someone doing kickoffs, someone different doing field goals and extra points. So really, what it comes down to is who will replace Tyler Davis. And Franklin mentioned that, when these guys, Pinniger gets here this summer, Penn State also currently will have some walk-ons. Carson Landis was a guy who Franklin has mentioned a few times in the past, walk-on kicker who's already been here, a guy that they had some work with last year. So you look at that, then you have a guy like Vlad Hilling who announced that he's going to walk on here he announced this last month. So Franklin said that when he was mentioning the specialists, there are some guys that he's excited about, but that he couldn't address them by name, which, of course, reading between the lines there, those would be the walk-on specialists because per NCAA rule, he can't address them by name because they're not signing, a financial aid agreement to be here. So that'll be something to keep an eye on, kind of how that shakes out. We'll see a little bit of it in the spring, but really I think the majority of that competition is going to have to take place in the summer because, you're not going to have all of these guys here in the spring. So we'll have to see how that goes. Another interesting note, the Nittany Lions have one winter workout in under their belts. The other one was canceled on Wednesday because of the snow, because all of Penn State was canceled for a rare snow day. So Franklin said, it's really kind of too early to tell with the 6 early enrollees and who's impressed him in these workouts. But he did say, as per usual, when you get these guys who come in here, it's a humbling experience. They come in here, they get acclimated. They're no longer the best guy, no longer the biggest guy, no longer the strongest. So they've kind of been going through that process. But he did say that Micah Parsons is as advertised. So I think, for Penn State fans, that's probably what you'd hoped. I know when I was covering wrestling last weekend, the big duel against Ohio State over in Rec Hall, Micah Parsons was there. Jesse Luketa was there. PJ Mustafer was up on a visit, and he was there as well. So you kind of have these guys who are starting to hang out a lot around each other and get to some events. But I will say, when I saw Luketa at wrestling last week, I had to kind of do a double take because he just looked kind of bigger and taller than what I had remembered. And Franklin did say that Luketa's body type is already starting to change and that he thinks, the linebacker is going to be a monster. So again, we'll have to see kind of how these things shake out. But another interesting note, linebacker Nick Tarberton is someone who Franklin said does give them the position flexibility kind of to be that defensive end linebacker type. And he said that Tarberton, the early enrollee, was actually recruited as such. So, talked a lot today about position flexibility, but there's a guy who certainly will have that. And one final note here, this should be a positive one. John Reid is expected to be full go for spring ball, James Franklin said. Now, Reid, when I talked to him back in, December at the Fiesta Bowl Media Day, he said that, he was ahead of schedule with his rehab coming back from that knee injury that sidelined him all the last year. And, the reality is Penn State doesn't need Reid to be 100% in April. They need John Reid to be 100% by August, by September. So really, he's ahead of schedule, it sounds. I'm curious to see how they limit him. If they do in spring ball, I would imagine they would. We've seen him go that route with veteran players before. But we'll have to see. So until then, as always, any of your Penn State questions, feel free to leave them right here in the comments section below. And I'll be sure to get to them next week on the next episode of the Penn State Show here on DK Sports Radio.